I don't think anyone advocates for more nuclear weapons on the planet.
Donald Trump said it would not be a bad thing. Do you agree with that or disagree with it?
I do not agree.
We are going to build the wall, okay?
Physical barrier in and of itself will not do the job. It has to be really a layered defense.
It's a temporary ban, in particular for certain people coming from certain horrible, where you have tremendous terrorism in the world.
I have no belief and do not support the idea that Muslims as a religious group should be denied admission to the United States.
Isn't that interesting? The president-elect's cabinet nominees don't agree with him on every position, but he said earlier he's okay with that.
We want them to be themselves, and I told them, be yourselves and say what you want to say. Don't worry about me. And I'm going to do the right thing, whatever it is. I may be right, and they may be right.
Joining me now, Hadley Heath Manning, Independent Women's Forum Senior Policy Analyst, and Atima Omara, former Young Democrats of America President. Hadley, I'll let you start. What do you think of that? What do you make of it?
Well, I'm hopeful. This means the president-elect will be open-minded. There will be some give and take and an open exchange of ideas among his cabinet members and his office. You know, any organization, whether it's a corporation or family business, shouldn't have, you know, this top-down lockstep agreement on every issue. There has to be challenge, there has to be criticism, and hopefully this means that through debate we'll come to some good ideas and good policies.
So, Atima, there's a couple different ways to look at it. I mean, you could say that he's being open-minded and he's appointing people who maybe they disagree with him and he's going to debate the issues, and that's sort of the hopeful way to look at these things. If you were cynical, you could say that he said things on the campaign trail to ignite certain emotions in people, and that now he's appointing people to walk those things back for him. That's what the cynic would say. What do you think?
I would actually say that there might be a third way of looking at it.
Good.
A third way of looking at it, as in a lot of these people, I think it was interesting to me that I saw that some of them were saying things that even like they weren't expecting to uphold a lot of those things. So maybe it's a little bit of two, but a little bit of three, where it's like they hadn't even sort of talked, where Tillerson talked about, well, I hadn't discussed some of my views on Russia with Trump, which I find questionable. I'm sure they had to have talked about something. Or Kelly in saying that, you know, I don't expect, or I'm not sure what I'm going to do with DACA and the building of a wall, which is something that Trump really, really cares about and has talked about a lot on the campaign and has since he's been elected. So I'm actually kind of curious to see what that means, because at the end of the day, they could say this and he could be very different about it.
Hadley, it could be that they haven't, because there hasn't been that much time and they also haven't been confirmed, that they haven't drilled down on the specific details, because I actually saw the Tillerson back and forth that she was talking about there, and they asked him a few questions on Russia and he answered, and I think it was Marco Rubio, and then he said, you know, but will you, he really went deep into some specifics, and Tillerson said, we haven't gone into that kind of detail on Russia yet. And you know, Marco Rubio was like, it's very hard for me to believe that, but he had answered a bunch of things they had talked about on Russia, but they hadn't gone into that level of detail. That's believable, because there's he interviewed a lot of different people for a lot of different posts. So you couldn't spend like 2 days defining your policy and where you agree, given that not that much time has gone by yet.
Right, and we've known since the campaign that President-elect Trump isn't someone who necessarily concerns himself with the details of every policy position, but he's really more of a businessman, and the way that he hires people may be different from the way that previous presidents have hired people into their cabinet, focused less on ideology and the specifics of the policy, and more on that particular person and whether or not they're right for the job.
I mean, that's really interesting. Also, Atima, we're really splitting hairs on when he said the Muslim ban. Later, he went back and he said, what I mean is that we can't just blanket let in people from places like Syria, where we know for a fact there are people coming in like in a Trojan horse, posing as refugees, who are going to try and come in and do us harm, that we have to stop for a moment on places where we could really be facing harm and assess what's going on there, which actually isn't that much different from what we heard at these congressional hearings when it was said, well, no, we're not going to ban people based solely on a religion, but we may pursue a line of questioning based on, for people who are Muslim and say, well, you're Muslim, are you coming here because you want to kill people? Which I don't know who would answer that honestly, but that's kind of where the questioning went. Was like, I mean, in some senses, they're sort of clarifying to a logical point what Trump did kind of say when he clarified down the road, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff he puts out there, and he definitely doesn't like to get, there's the devil's in the details, and he doesn't really focus on that. I think he's very much a delegator. So I think that they're clarifying a little bit more where he stands on that. But at the same time, I think it's interesting, when I hear, any of the national security team being like the CIA guys say, like, I don't expect waterboarding to be something that I do, but that's something that Trump has said. So,
although he's walked that back too. We got to go. I wish we had more time. You guys are both